Amanda Martinez had everything a 12-year-old could want. Designer clothes, a mansion overlooking the city, and a police chief father who commanded respect throughout their community. But on a sleepless night in October, she discovered that her perfect life was built on the suffering of children just like her. Hidden behind a family portrait in her father's study was a safe containing stacks of cash, untraceable phones, and photographs that would haunt her forever. The loving father who read her bedtime stories was discussing missing children like business transactions, planning their disappearance with the same care he used to organize family vacations. Amanda faced an impossible choice: remain silent and keep her comfortable life, or expose the monster living in her own home and save lives she'd never even met. What she decided to do next would destroy everything she'd ever known, but save countless innocent children from a fate worse than death. The first rays of dawn filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Amanda Martinez's bedroom, casting golden streaks across Italian marble floors that cost more than most people's homes. At 12 years old, Amanda had never known anything but luxury, yet lately, something indefinable gnawed at her consciousness, like a splinter buried too deep to remove. She padded barefoot across the heated marble, her silk pajamas whispering against her skin as she moved toward the massive windows overlooking the city below. The Martinez mansion perched on the hillside like a crown jewel, its manicured gardens cascading down toward the urban sprawl that seemed a world away from her privileged existence. The infinity pool stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its surface mirror-perfect in the morning stillness. "Miss Amanda, your breakfast is ready," came the soft voice of Maria, the housekeeper, from behind her bedroom door. But there was something different in Maria's tone lately, a careful distance that hadn't existed before. Amanda had noticed it first 3 weeks ago, the way the household staff had begun avoiding her eyes, their conversations dying the moment she entered a room. As Amanda descended the grand staircase, her fingertips trailing along the polished mahogany banister, she caught fragments of whispered conversations from the kitchen. The words were too soft to understand, but the urgency in the voices made her stomach tighten with unexplained anxiety. When she appeared in the doorway, the voices stopped, hidden in shadow. The hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when she appeared, her father's study in particular, had become a source of growing fascination and fear. Chief Roberto Martinez commanded respect throughout the city, his imposing figure instantly recognizable at public events. But Amanda had begun to notice the way people looked at him, not just with respect but with something else: fear. The neighbors who smiled too widely and spoke too carefully, the way conversations shifted when he approached at charity galas. His collection of expensive watches filled an entire display case: Rolexes, Patek Philippe's, pieces worth tens of thousands of dollars each. His closet housed rows of designer suits that cost more than most people earned in months. For a police chief's salary, their lifestyle seemed impossibly lavish, yet Amanda had never questioned it until recently. The crystal chandeliers that dominated each room no longer seemed beautiful to Amanda. They felt heavy, oppressive, like glittering cages suspended above her head. The marble floors that had once been perfect for sliding in her socks now felt cold beneath her feet, no matter how the heating system warmed them. Every luxury in their home carried a weight she couldn't name but increasingly couldn't ignore. At night, lying in her canopy bed surrounded by silk pillows and cashmere throws, Amanda found herself listening to the sounds of the house. Footsteps in hallways where no one should be walking, car doors slamming at 2 a.m., muffled voices speaking in urgent, careful tones, the electronic beeping of security systems being activated and deactivated at odd hours. Her beautiful bedroom, with its hand-painted murals and antique furniture, had begun to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a prison cell, luxurious certainly, but confining nonetheless. The golden cage was beautiful, but it was still a cage, and Amanda was beginning to sense the bars closing around her, even if she couldn't yet see them clearly. The Martinez family breakfast table could have graced the cover of an upscale lifestyle magazine. Crystal stemware caught the morning light, casting rainbows across fine bone china that bore the family's initials in elegant gold script. The mahogany table, large enough to seat 12, felt cavernous with just the four of them gathered at one end, their voices echoing slightly in the formal dining room. Elena Martinez sat perfectly poised, her blonde hair styled in an immaculate chignon that hadn't moved despite the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to public scrutiny. "Amanda, I've laid out your navy dress, the Armani Junior. We need to present the right image." Her words were directed at Amanda, but her eyes remained fixed on her untouched Eggs Benedict, as if maintaining the illusion required her complete concentration. Chief Martinez dominated the table even while seated, his presence filling the room like a physical force. His uniform was impeccably pressed, his badge gleaming, his posture ramrod straight, even while reading the morning newspaper. But it was his reaction to the crime reports that made Amanda's skin crawl. Where she expected to see concern or determination, she saw something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. "Another trafficking investigation stalled," he muttered, folding the paper with deliberate precision. "Lack of evidence, they say." His lips curved in what might have been a smile, but Amanda felt a chill run down her spine at the expression. Good thing our department knows how to prioritize resources effectively. 8-year-old Tommy remained blissfully oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, his attention focused entirely on the latest electronic gadget their father had brought home the previous evening. A handheld gaming device that cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. "Can I get the new racing game too?" Tommy demanded, syrup from his Belgian waffles sticky on his fingers. "All my friends have it, and I need the premium version with all the extra features." "Of course, mijo," Chief Martinez said indulgently, reaching over to ruffle Tommy's dark hair. "Only the best for my family." But when his eyes met Amanda's across the table, something in his expression made her look away quickly, her appetite disappearing entirely. The household staff moved around them like ghosts, appearing silently to refill coffee cups or replace empty platters before vanishing just as quietly. Carmen, the cook, kept her eyes downcast as she served, her usual warm chatter replaced by nervous efficiency. James, their driver, stood at attention by the door, his face carefully blank as he waited to escort Amanda to school. As Carmen helped Amanda into her school blazer, custom-tailored with the family crest embroidered in gold thread, Amanda caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked every inch the privileged private school student, her uniform perfectly pressed, her dark hair glossy with expensive smile practiced, every pose designed to project success, respectability, civic duty. But Amanda was beginning to see the spaces between the photographs, the moments not captured, the conversations not recorded. Her father's salary, even with overtime and bonuses, couldn't possibly support their lifestyle. The mansion alone, with its imported marble and custom everything, represented more money than a police chief should have. The cars in their garage, his custom Mercedes, Elena's BMW, even Amanda's future car, already waiting in the garage like a promise, spoke of wealth that didn't match their supposed income. As James held open the car door for her school commute, Amanda caught a glimpse of her father's expression reflected in the window. For just a moment, his carefully maintained facade slipped, revealing something cold and calculating that made her blood freeze. When he noticed her watching, the loving father mask snapped back into place, but it was too late. Amanda had seen what lay beneath, and the golden cage suddenly felt much smaller than before. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight as Amanda crept barefoot down the marble staircase, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sleep had eluded her for hours, her mind churning with questions she couldn't articulate. The house felt different at night, not the warm sanctuary of her childhood, but something alive with secrets that whispered in the shadows. Her father's study called to her like a magnet, its heavy oak door slightly ajar, spilling a thin line of amber light across the Persian runner. She'd walked past this room thousands of times, but tonight felt different, Tonight, she needed answers to questions she was only beginning to form. The study embodied everything her father represented: power, authority, success. Leather-bound law books lined floor-to-ceiling shelves, their gold lettering catching the lamplight. Police commendations covered one wall in perfect rows, each frame identical, each award a testament to Chief Martinez's distinguished career. His desk, massive and imposing, dominated the room like a throne, its surface meticulously organized with expensive pens, crystal paperweights, and silver-framed photographs of political handshakes and ceremony speeches. But it was the family portrait above the fireplace that drew Amanda's attention. Darkness. The safe door stood slightly ajar, an oversight that would change everything. Inside, stacks of cash sat bundled with rubber bands, more money than Amanda had ever seen in one place. But it wasn't the cash that made her stomach lurch with horrified recognition. It was the photographs scattered among the bills, pictures of children, some her own age, their faces haunted with an expression she didn't understand, but instinctively feared. There were also several cell phones, their screens dark and anonymous, and documents with official letterheads that meant nothing to her 12-year-old mind, but somehow felt ominous. "What are you doing in here?" The voice, cold and sharp as winter steel, made Amanda's blood freeze. She spun around to find her father standing in the doorway, his expression transformed from the loving parent she knew into something that made her take an involuntary step backward. Gone was any trace of warmth or affection. In its place stood a stranger wearing her father's face. Chief Martinez moved with predatory grace, closing the door behind him with deliberate care before approaching the safe. His eyes never left Amanda's face as he began methodically returning the contents to their hiding place, his movements efficient and practiced. "This is not a game, Amanda," he said quietly, his voice carrying an undertone that made her skin crawl with fear. "Some things are not meant for children to see." "Papa, I was just—" Amanda began, but her father's raised hand silenced her immediately. "You were just leaving," he finished, his tone brooked no argument. "And you were never here. Do you understand me?" The transformation was complete now. The man standing before her bore no resemblance to the father who had read her bedtime stories, who had taught her to ride her bicycle, who had picked her up when she scraped her knees. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous, someone with secrets worth protecting at any cost. Amanda nodded mutely, her throat too tight with fear to produce sound. As she moved toward the door on shaking legs, her father's voice followed her. "Amanda." She turned back reluctantly. "Family loyalty is everything. Remember that. Everything we have, everything we are, depends on keeping family business within the family. People who forget that lesson tend to regret it." The implications of his words settled over her like a suffocating blanket. First time in her privileged life, Amanda Martinez was truly afraid. Not of monsters under the bed or ghosts in the closet, but of the monster who lived down the hall and called her daughter. The impossible choice that would define her future was beginning to crystallize. Remain silent and complicit in whatever darkness funded their luxury, or find the courage to discover just how deep her father's secrets ran. The golden cage was beautiful, but Amanda was beginning to understand that beauty could be the most dangerous trap of all. Detective Marcus Williams stood in the drizzling rain outside the rundown apartment complex, his weathered hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup that had long since gone cold. At 42, 15 years on the force had etched lines around his gray eyes, lines that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too many cases that ended without justice. The crime scene tape fluttered in the wind like yellow ribbons of defeat, marking another location where hope had died. "Same pattern as the others," Officer Janet Chen said quietly, approaching with her notepad clutched against her chest. 12-year-old Jessica Reeves, reported missing from the Sunshine foster home 3 days ago. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, just gone. Williams nodded grimly, his jaw tightening as he surveyed the sparse apartment where Jessica had lived with her elderly foster mother, Mrs. Patterson. The old woman sat on her front steps, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with grief that Williams had seen too many times before. 7 children in 3 months, all from the foster care system, all vanished without a trace, all cases that seemed to evaporate the moment they gained momentum. His divorce 3 years ago had left Williams with an empty house and only Scout, his German Shepherd partner, for company. The job had consumed his marriage, his wife Sarah claiming she couldn't compete with his obsession for justice. She'd been right in a way. Williams couldn't let go, couldn't stop pushing when everyone else seemed content to file reports and move on. It had made him a pariah in the department, the detective who asked too many questions and ruffled too many feathers. "Detective Williams," came the familiar voice of Captain Rodriguez from behind him. Williams turned to see his superior approaching, his expression carefully neutral. "I need 3 months. There's clearly a pattern here." "There's no pattern, Williams," Rodriguez interrupted, his voice carrying an edge of warning. "These are isolated incidents. Missing kids from broken homes, probably runaways. The robbery series has actual leads, actual evidence. That's where I need my best detective." The dismissal stung, not because Williams cared about recognition, but because it meant another investigation dying on the vine. He'd seen this before, cases that seemed promising suddenly deemed low priority, evidence that mysteriously went missing from storage, witnesses who stopped returning calls. The department's clearance rate looked impressive on paper, but Williams knew the truth. They were only solving cases that someone wanted solved. "Captain, I've been tracking connections between these disappearances. The children all came from the same social services network. They all had caseworkers from—" "Drop it, Williams." Rodriguez's tone left no room for argument. "You've got a reputation for seeing conspiracies where there are coincidences. Don't make me question whether you're still fit for detective work." As Rodriguez walked away, Williams felt the weight of isolation settle over him like a familiar coat. 15 years of service, countless commendations, and yet he'd become the department's pariah simply for refusing to accept easy answers. His fellow detectives avoided partnering with him, claiming he was too intense, too unwilling to compromise. The truth was simpler and more frightening. Williams had begun to suspect that someone didn't want these cases solved. Back at his desk later that afternoon, Williams pulled out the manila folder he kept hidden in his bottom drawer, his unofficial file on the missing children. Photographs of 7 young faces stared back at him. Jessica, Tommy, Maria, David, Sarah, Michael, and little Annie, only 9 years old. Each had been dismissed as a runaway or isolated incident, but Williams saw the connections that others refused to acknowledge. Scout padded over to his desk, resting his massive head on Williams' knee with a soft whine that seemed to say, "I know you're frustrated, partner." Williams scratched behind the dog's ears, drawing comfort from the only colleague who never questioned his methods or motives. "We're not giving up on them, boy," Williams whispered, "even if we have to do this alone." The office around them buzzed with the routine activity of a police department. His own department seemed determined to ignore. The question that haunted him wasn't just who was taking these kids. It was why no one seemed to want them found. Dawn was breaking over the industrial district when Williams and Scout arrived at the abandoned warehouse, their breath visible in the cold morning air. The building had been empty for 5 years, its broken windows like dead eyes staring across the rail yard. According to the tip Williams had received, Jessica Reeves had been seen in this area before her disappearance, but the uniformed officers who'd initially canvassed the neighborhood had found nothing. Scout leaped from the passenger seat before Williams had fully stopped the car, his nose immediately working the air with an intensity that never ceased to amaze his human partner. The German Shepherd wasn't just well-trained. There was something almost mystical about his ability to read scenes, to sense things that remained invisible to human perception. "What do you smell, boy?" Williams asked. watching as Scout circled the warehouse's perimeter with deliberate precision. The dog's ears were pricked forward, his entire body taut with concentration. After 3 years as partners, Williams had learned to trust Scout's instincts completely. The dog had led him to evidence in cases where forensics teams had found nothing, had tracked suspects through urban landscapes that should have been impossible to navigate by scent alone. Scout paused at a side entrance where a chain-link gate hung partially open, its padlock cut with bolt cutters. The dog's low whine carried an urgency that Williams had learned to interpret as distress mixed with determination. Whatever Scout was sensing, it wasn't good. Inside the warehouse, shafts of sunlight illuminated dust motes dancing in the air like ghosts. The concrete floor was littered with debris, broken bottles, discarded newspapers, the detritus of urban decay. But Scout moved through the space with purpose, following an invisible trail that only he could detect. They climbed a rusted metal staircase to the building's second level, Scout's claws clicking against the corrugated steel steps. Here, the dog's behavior changed dramatically. His hackles rose, and he began to pace in tight circles, whimpering softly. Williams had seen this reaction before. Scout was sensing trauma, the lingering emotional residue of fear and suffering that seemed to cling to certain locations. Williams pried up the boards, revealing a small cache of personal items, jewelry, photographs, small toys, the kind of treasures children carry with them. Among them was a purple hair ribbon that matched the one in Jessica Reeves' school photograph. Scout's extraordinary abilities extended beyond simple scent tracking. The dog seemed to read the emotional history of places, responding to invisible traces of human suffering that lingered long after the physical evidence had been removed. Williams had seen him locate burial sites that had been undisturbed for years, find hidden compartments that investigators had missed, and track suspects through environments where traditional methods failed. As Williams carefully documented the hidden cache with his camera, Scout moved to another section of the warehouse, his nose working methodically across the floor. The dog's behavior suggested recent activity, within days, possibly hours. Someone had been using this location, and recently. The partnership between Williams and Scout had evolved into something that transcended typical canine unit protocols. They communicated through subtle signals, a glance, a gesture, the angle at which Scout held his ears. The dog seemed to understand not just commands but intentions, anticipating Williams' investigative needs with uncanny accuracy. "Good boy," Williams whispered as Scout indicated another area of interest near a loading dock. Here, tire tracks in the dust suggested vehicles had been loaded and unloaded recently. The pattern was consistent with the kind of operation Williams suspected. Children moved like cargo, transported from place to place by people who saw them as commodities rather than human beings. But even as Williams gathered evidence, he knew what would happen next. The items would be logged into the evidence system, photographed, cataloged. Then, inexplicably, they would disappear. Lab results would be delayed indefinitely. Witnesses would become unavailable. The investigation would stall, then quietly die. Scout looked up at him with those intelligent dark eyes, and Williams could swear the dog understood their predicament. They were fighting a war against shadows, pursuing justice in a system that seemed designed to prevent them from finding it. But Scout's unwavering dedication gave Williams strength. The dog never questioned their mission, never grew discouraged by setbacks, never stopped believing that the truth was worth pursuing. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Williams made a decision that would change loyalty, understood the difference between following orders and doing what was right. In a department full of politics and compromise, Scout remained Williams' one reliable ally in the pursuit of justice. Captain Rodriguez's office smelled of stale coffee and administrative defeat, the walls lined with commendations and photographs that spoke of a career built on playing by the rules. Williams sat across from his superior's desk, the evidence from the warehouse carefully organized in manila folders, while Scout lay at his feet, the dog's presence both comforting and somehow disapproving of their surroundings. "I found a cache of personal items belonging to at least 3 of the missing children," Williams began, opening the first folder. "The warehouse shows signs of recent activity, and Scout detected evidence of trauma consistent with the kind of operation we're dealing with." Rodriguez barely glanced at the photographs Williams spread across his desk. "Detective, we've been through this. These children are runaways from difficult situations. You're seeing patterns where none exist." The dismissal was so swift, so practiced, that Williams felt his suspicions crystallize into certainty. "Captain, with respect, a purple hair ribbon identical to one worn by Jessica Reeves doesn't suggest a runaway scenario. It suggests she was held at that location." "Hair ribbons aren't unique evidence, Williams." Rodriguez's voice carried a warning edge. "Thousands of children own purple hair ribbons. You're making connections that aren't there." Williams had heard variations of this conversation 7 times now, and each iteration felt more rehearsed than the last. "Sir, I'm requesting additional resources to process this scene properly. Forensics team, full evidence collection, interviews with—" Request denied. The response came so quickly it was clearly prepared. "The warehouse has been condemned for demolition. Environmental hazards make it unsafe for extended investigation." The lie was so blatant that Williams actually felt his jaw drop. "Captain, I was just there this morning. There are no environmental hazards posted, no demolition permits." "Are you questioning my assessment of departmental resources, Detective?" Rodriguez's tone had shifted to something Williams recognized as barely controlled hostility. "Because if you are, perhaps we need to discuss whether you're still the right fit for this unit." Scout raised his head from the floor. He'd been avoiding for months. The pattern wasn't just about missing children. It was about cases being systematically buried, evidence disappearing, investigations killed before they could gain momentum. Someone with significant authority was ensuring these cases never saw resolution. Back at his desk, Williams made a decision that would fundamentally change his relationship with the department. Opening his laptop, he began copying every file, every photograph, every piece of evidence to an encrypted external drive. If the official system wouldn't preserve justice, he would create an unofficial one. Scout padded over to his desk, resting his chin on Williams' leg while the detective worked. The dog's presence was reassuring, a reminder that at least one partner in this building still believed in doing the right thing, regardless of politics or career consequences. "We're going off the books, boy," Williams whispered, scratching behind Scout's ears. "From now on, we keep everything ourselves." The decision felt both liberating and terrifying. Williams was essentially declaring war on his own department, betting his career and pension on the belief that somewhere in the city's power structure, people were profiting from the disappearance of vulnerable children. The evidence was there. He just had to be smart enough to gather it without alerting the very people who were trying to suppress it. Over the following days, Williams began building his secret investigation. He created encrypted files on his personal computer, established secure communication protocols, and began reaching out to contacts outside the department, social workers, journalists, federal agents, anyone who might be willing to listen to what the local police wouldn't acknowledge. Scout became his early warning system during these covert activities. The dog's ability to sense people's intentions made him invaluable in identifying which colleagues could be trusted and which posed potential danger. When Detective Morrison approached Williams' desk with offers of assistance, Scout's low growl and raised hackles suggested the offer wasn't as innocent as it appeared. The warehouse was demolished 3 days after Williams' meeting with Rodriguez, environmental hazards that hadn't existed during his investigation, suddenly requiring immediate action. But Williams had anticipated this, returning the night before to conduct his own thorough evidence collection, with Scout helping to locate items that would have otherwise been lost forever. As Williams watched the investigation of his career, one that would either expose the truth or destroy him in the attempt. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck 2 a.m. as Amanda crept barefoot down the marble staircase, her silk nightgown whispering against the cool stone. Sleep had become a stranger to her in the weeks since discovering her father's hidden safe, her mind churning with questions that seemed to multiply rather than resolve themselves. Tonight, the restlessness felt particularly acute, driving her from her bed despite the risk of being discovered wandering the mansion's halls after midnight. The house felt different in the deep hours of night, not the warm sanctuary of her childhood, but something alive with secrets that breathed in the shadows. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows, casting geometric patterns across the Persian rugs and marble floors, transforming familiar spaces into something almost alien. Amanda moved with practiced silence, having learned over the past month to navigate the mansion's acoustic peculiarities, knowing which floorboards creaked and which hallways carried sound. Her father's study drew her like a magnet, its heavy oak door standing slightly ajar, spilling amber light across the hallway's polished floors. The room itself was a monument to Chief Martinez's authority and success. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with leather-bound law books whose gilt lettering caught the lamplight, creating an atmosphere of scholarly respectability. Police commendations covered one entire wall in precise military rows, each frame identical, each award a testament to a career built on public service and community trust. But Amanda was beginning to see the darkness that lurked beneath the room's impressive facade. The massive mahogany desk dominated the space like a fortress, its surface meticulously organized with crystal paperweights and silver-framed photographs of handshakes with mayors and senators. Yet hidden within this display of civic virtue were the burner phones, the encrypted communications, the locked drawers that contained secrets her 12-year-old mind was only beginning to comprehend. Her father's voice, low and controlled, drifted through the partially open door. "The Reeves girl needs to disappear from the files completely," he was saying, his tone carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Rodriguez has already transferred Williams off the case, but the detective is becoming problematic. He's too persistent, asking too many questions." Skin crawl. 7 children processed in 3 months, and the foster care system is providing perfect cover. No one misses kids who are already considered throwaway cases. The casual way he spoke about children, using their names as if they were inventory items rather than human beings, made Amanda's stomach lurch with nausea. Jessica Reeves had been on the news just days ago, her foster mother pleading tearfully for her safe return. Yet here was Amanda's father discussing her disappearance as if it were a successful business transaction. "The warehouse is being demolished tomorrow," Chief Martinez said, settling into his leather chair with the satisfied air of a man solving problems efficiently. "Any physical evidence will be buried under tons of rubble. As for Williams and his dog, they're being reassigned to cases that will keep them busy and away from our operations." Amanda's legs trembled so violently she had to grip the doorframe to remain standing. The world she thought she knew, the loving father, the respected police chief, the pillar of community virtue, was crumbling around her like a house built on sand. In its place stood a stranger who spoke about missing children with the same detached professionalism he might use to discuss traffic citations. "The payment structure is working perfectly," her father continued, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction that made Amanda want to vomit. $50,000 per case, with bonuses for maintaining clean files and handling any complications. The judges and prosecutors are all cooperating beautifully. Amazing how motivated people become when they're properly incentivized. The phone conversation continued, but Amanda's hearing seemed to fade, replaced by a rushing sound like ocean waves in her ears. Her comfortable life, her beautiful home, her expensive clothes and private school education, all of it was built on the suffering of children her own age. The realization hit her like a physical blow, doubling her over with dry heaves that she barely managed to suppress. Every luxury surrounding her suddenly felt contaminated, tainted by the knowledge of how it had been purchased. The Italian marble beneath her feet, the crystal chandeliers above her head, the designer clothes in her walk-in closet, all of it paid for with money earned by destroying young lives. Amanda had always known her family was wealthy, but she'd never questioned the source of that wealth until now. We knew any businessman, but she could no longer bear to listen. The man she had loved unconditionally, who had read her bedtime stories and taught her to ride a bicycle, was a monster wearing her father's face. The journey back to her bedroom felt like walking through a nightmare, each familiar hallway transformed into something sinister by her newfound knowledge. The family photographs lining the walls, images of charity galas and police ceremonies that had once filled her with pride, now seemed like elaborate lies designed to hide the truth of what Chief Martinez really was. As Amanda reached her bedroom door, she caught a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror and barely recognized the reflection staring back. Gone was the carefree girl who had awakened that morning. In her place stood someone older, burdened with knowledge too terrible for a child to carry. Her world had fundamentally changed in the space of a single overheard conversation, and Amanda knew with crushing certainty that there would be no going back to the innocence she had lost forever. Amanda's laptop screen glowed in the pre-dawn darkness of her bedroom, the blue light casting ghostly shadows across her face as she typed with trembling fingers. Sleep had become impossible since overhearing her father's conversation 3 hours earlier, her mind racing with fragments of names and dates that demanded investigation. Jessica Reeves missing yielded dozens of news articles, each one a heartbreaking plea from foster families and social workers who genuinely cared about the vanished children. The local newspaper's website revealed a pattern that made Amanda's blood run cold. 7 children had disappeared from the foster care system in the past 3 months, each case receiving minimal media coverage before quietly fading from public attention. The articles followed an eerily similar structure: initial reports of concern, brief descriptions of the children's troubled backgrounds, then nothing. No follow-up stories, no investigative pieces, no sustained public pressure for answers. Amanda began creating a spreadsheet, her methodical nature taking over despite the emotional turmoil churning in her stomach. Each missing child received their own row: name, age, date of disappearance, last known location, assigned caseworker. As the data accumulated, patterns emerged that would have impressed her private school teachers, if only they could see how their 12-year-old student was applying research skills to uncover her own father's schedule. Showed mysterious appointments and late-night departures. The most chilling discovery came when Amanda remembered her father's habit of keeping newspaper clippings in his desk drawer, articles he claimed to save for professional reference. Creeping back downstairs with her heart hammering, she photographed the contents of the drawer with her phone's camera. The clippings told a story of systematic failure, cases dismissed for lack of evidence, investigations transferred between departments, witnesses who became suddenly unavailable for interviews. Each article bore subtle signs of her father's influence. Quotes from senior law enforcement officials suggesting the children were likely runaways. References to departmental resource constraints that prevented thorough investigations. Mentions of evidence that had been contaminated or compromised, rendering it inadmissible in court. The language was bureaucratic and official, but Amanda was beginning to recognize her father's handiwork in every carefully crafted excuse. Back in her bedroom, Amanda's investigation took on an increasingly sophisticated character. She learned to screenshot articles before they could be taken down, to save cached versions of web pages that might disappear, to document her findings in encrypted files that her computer teacher had shown her how to create for protecting homework from hackers. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was using skills learned in her privileged private school to investigate the crimes that funded her education. The physical evidence around the mansion began making terrible sense. Those burner phones she'd glimpsed in her father's safe weren't backup devices. They were untraceable communication tools for coordinating criminal activities. The encrypted messages that appeared on his computer screen weren't work-related security protocols. They were coded conversations about human trafficking operations. The late-night visitors who came and went through the service entrance weren't troubled citizens seeking help from their police chief. They were co-conspirators in a network that treated children as commodities. Amanda discovered that her father's charity work, the fundraising events her mother organized, the community outreach programs he publicly supported, provided perfect cover for identifying vulnerable children. Foster care facilities, youth shelters, community centers serving at-risk populations, all of them received generous donations from the Martinez Family Foundation, and all of them provided access to children who might not be missed if they disappeared. The transformation within Amanda was profound and adding another layer to her horror and disbelief. She began noticing things that had always been present but invisible to her child's perspective. The way certain police officers looked at her father with something that went beyond professional respect. It was fear mixed with complicity. The careful way her mother deflected questions about their wealth, always redirecting conversations toward charity work and community service. The subtle but persistent emphasis on family loyalty that had seemed like normal parental guidance, but now felt like preparation for maintaining dangerous secrets. By sunrise, Amanda had created a comprehensive timeline that would have impressed federal investigators. She documented correlations between missing children and her father's activities, identified patterns in media coverage that suggested systematic suppression of information, and begun to understand the scope of the network her father had built. But with understanding came a crushing sense of isolation. She was 12 years old, alone with knowledge that could destroy not just her father but her entire family, surrounded by people who were either complicit or willfully blind to the truth. The hardest realization was that her comfortable life, everything she'd taken for granted, was funded by the suffering of children just like her. Every meal she ate, every piece of clothing she wore, every privilege she enjoyed had been purchased with money earned through unspeakable crimes. Amanda Martinez was no longer just the police chief's daughter. She was the beneficiary of a criminal enterprise, and that knowledge would haunt her forever. The breakfast Amanda couldn't eat sat cooling on bone china that suddenly felt like evidence of complicity, each expensive dish a reminder of how her family's wealth had been earned. 4 days had passed since her midnight discovery, and Amanda found herself unable to consume anything without thinking about the children whose disappearances had paid for it. Her mother's concerned questions about her appetite only made the nausea worse. Elena's perfectly manicured fingers reaching across the table to check Amanda's forehead for fever. Sleep had become an impossibility, replaced by hours of staring at her bedroom ceiling while her mind raced through the implications of what she'd learned. The Egyptian cotton sheets that had once felt luxurious now seemed to whisper accusations, and the custom-designed furniture appeared to mock her with its obscene cost. Amanda would lie awake calculating. How many children's lives had been destroyed to pay for her canopy bed? How many families torn apart to afford the crystal given her? Pieces she'd treasured as family heirlooms now felt like blood diamonds around her neck and wrists. Even her laptop, the tool she'd used to uncover the truth, seemed tainted by the knowledge of how it had been purchased. "Amanda, sweetheart, you're starting to worry me," Elena said during one of their increasingly tense breakfast conversations. "You've barely eaten in days, and Maria says you've been wandering the house at night. Are you having trouble sleeping?" The concern in her mother's voice sounded genuine, but Amanda had begun to question everything about her family's public personas. Was Elena truly ignorant of her husband's crimes, or was she simply another skilled actor in their elaborate deception? The possibility that her mother knew, that she'd been complicit in maintaining their lifestyle while children suffered, was almost too painful to consider. "I've just been having bad dreams," Amanda replied, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. How could she explain that her nightmares were actually waking revelations about the monster living down the hall? Amanda's attempts to gauge her mother's knowledge became increasingly desperate. She dropped hints about missing children, mentioned news stories about trafficking cases, watched Elena's face for any flicker of recognition or guilt. But her mother's responses were consistently appropriate. Expressions of concern, comments about the importance of child safety, suggestions that Amanda was spending too much time reading troubling news stories. The isolation was crushing for a 12-year-old who had never kept serious secrets from her family. Amanda found herself studying her parents' faces during dinner conversations, searching for signs of deception or guilt, analyzing every word for hidden meanings. Her father's casual comments about work took on sinister implications, and her mother's social planning seemed like elaborate misdirection designed to maintain their public image. School became another source of torment. Amanda's friends chatted about typical adolescent concerns, upcoming tests, weekend plans, celebrity gossip, while she carried knowledge that made such conversations feel surreal. How could she pretend to care about who was dating whom when she knew her father was orchestrating the disappearance of children their age? The disconnect between her inner reality and the external world around her felt like living in two different dimensions simultaneously. Her grades began to slip as concentration became impossible. Teachers who had once praised Amanda's academic performance, dark circles appeared under her eyes. Her skin took on a pale, unhealthy pallor, and she lost weight from her inability to eat without thinking about how each meal had been purchased. Her body was rebelling against the knowledge her mind had absorbed, manifesting the psychological trauma in increasingly visible ways. Most painful was the realization that she was completely alone with her knowledge. Her friends would never understand, and sharing such information could put them in danger. Her extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, all looked up to Chief Martinez as a pillar of respectability and success. Even if Amanda found the courage to speak, who would believe that their beloved police chief was actually a criminal mastermind? The impossible choice that had been forming in Amanda's mind for days finally crystallized into sharp focus. She could remain silent, continue living her privileged life while knowing it was built on other children's suffering, essentially becoming complicit in her father's crimes through inaction. Or she could find a way to expose the truth, knowing that doing so would destroy everything she had ever known and loved about her life. The weight of this decision felt impossible for someone who should have been worried about middle school social dynamics and weekend sleepovers. Instead, Amanda Martinez was grappling with questions of morality and justice that would challenge adults, trying to determine whether she had the courage to sacrifice her own comfortable existence to save children she'd never met, but whose faces haunted her dreams. As she lay in her expensive bed, surrounded by luxury that now felt like a prison, Amanda realized that her childhood had ended the moment she overheard that phone conversation. The girl who had awakened 5 days ago no longer existed, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes doing the right thing meant losing everything that had once defined your world. The Martinez family's monthly charity dinner provided Amanda with the perfect opportunity she'd been waiting for, her father's attention completely absorbed by the dozen influential guests mingling in their formal dining room, their conversations punctuated by the gentle clink of crystal glasses and appreciative murmurs about Elena's exquisite hosting. Amanda had perfected the art of being invisible at these gatherings, the dutiful daughter who appeared briefly to be introduced before retreating to her room, supposedly to focus on homework. Tonight, however, her retreat was strategic rather than genuine. She waited precisely 23 minutes, long enough for the dinner conversation to reach that beckoned like a treasure trove of forbidden knowledge, its heavy oak door slightly ajar as always during social gatherings. Chief Martinez's way of demonstrating trust in his guests while maintaining accessibility for any urgent police matters that might arise. Amanda had learned to use these windows of opportunity, moments when her father's guard was lowered by wine and the performance of respectability. The smartphone her parents had given her for her 12th birthday, a symbol of their wealth and generosity, had become her most valuable investigative tool. She'd learned to photograph documents quickly and silently, adjusting camera settings to capture clear images even in low light, organizing the evidence into encrypted folders with names that would mean nothing to anyone else browsing her phone. Tonight's haul was particularly damning. Bank statements showed deposits that dwarfed her father's official police salary, regular transfers of $50,000, sometimes more, from accounts with innocuous names like Community Development LLC and Youth Services Foundation. The amounts staggered Amanda. She calculated that her father was earning more in a month from these mysterious sources than most families saw in an entire year. Contact lists revealed a network that extended far beyond local law enforcement. Judge Patricia Blackwood, whose stern face Amanda recognized from newspaper coverage of important trials, appeared alongside what could only be described as criminal associates. District Attorney Michael Chen, the same prosecutor who appeared at their charity events, praising Chief Martinez's dedication to justice, was listed under coded names that suggested a very different relationship than their public personas indicated. The most chilling discovery was a series of coded communications that Amanda's methodical mind began to decipher through pattern recognition. References to packages that corresponded with missing children reports, delivery schedules that aligned with dates when young people vanished from foster care, quality control issues that seemed to describe children who had fought back or tried to escape. Amanda's documentation had evolved from simple photograph collection to sophisticated intelligence gathering. She'd learned to cross-reference dates, to identify recurring patterns, to build comprehensive profiles of her father's associates. Her computer science classes had taught her about encryption and secure file storage, skills she never imagined using to investigate her own family's criminal activities. The close calls were by the doorway, his eyes scanning the room with the trained suspicion of a career law enforcement officer. "Looking for something to read, Mija?" he'd asked, his tone casual but his gaze sharp as it swept across his desk, checking for signs of disturbance. "Just browsing," Amanda had replied, her voice somehow steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I thought you might have something about criminology for my social studies project." The lie had satisfied him then, but Amanda noticed how his eyes lingered on her face, searching for deception with the practiced instincts of someone accustomed to interrogating suspects. She'd learned to prepare cover stories for her presence in forbidden areas, to have plausible explanations ready for why she might be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her espionage techniques had grown increasingly sophisticated despite her young age. She'd figured out how to disable the sound on her phone's camera, how to use reflective surfaces to monitor hallways while she worked, how to recognize the acoustic signatures that warned of approaching footsteps. The innocent girl who had stumbled upon her father's safe 6 weeks ago had evolved into someone who could have impressed professional investigators with her methodical approach and attention to security. But with each new piece of evidence, Amanda felt the weight of her knowledge growing heavier. The files on her computer now contained enough information to destroy dozens of careers and expose a criminal network that reached into the highest levels of local government. She was no longer just the police chief's daughter who had accidentally discovered family secrets. She was sitting on evidence of systemic corruption that could reshape the entire city's power structure. The sophistication of her investigation both impressed and terrified her. At 12 years old, she had developed skills that most adults would never need, driven by a combination of moral outrage and the desperate need to understand the full scope of her father's crimes before deciding what to do with her terrible knowledge. Amanda's understanding of her father's criminal enterprise crystallized during a dinner party that would forever change her perception of the city's power structure. Hidden in the alcove beneath the main staircase, a childhood hiding spot that had served her well during games of hide-and-seek, she listened as the conversation in her father's study revealed the true scope of the network operating under the guise of civic responsibility and public service. Judge Patricia Blackwood's voice carried the authority she wielded in courtroom proceedings, but tonight she was discussing case that prevents any future review. District Attorney Michael Chen's contribution revealed the systematic nature of their corruption. "My office has implemented new protocols for reviewing trafficking cases," he explained, his tone suggesting these protocols were designed to hinder rather than help investigations. "Any case involving foster children now requires additional supervisory approval, which creates delays that typically result in evidence degradation and witness unavailability." Amanda pressed herself deeper into the shadows as the conversation continued, her mind racing to process the implications of what she was hearing. These weren't isolated incidents or individual acts of corruption. This was a coordinated system designed to protect a criminal enterprise that treated missing children as acceptable casualties in pursuit of profit. The trafficking operation itself was more sophisticated than Amanda's worst fears had imagined. Children were recruited from foster care facilities and youth shelters through a network of corrupted social workers who identified the most vulnerable candidates. Kids with no family advocates, no stable support systems, no one who would raise sustained alarm if they disappeared. These children were then transported through a series of safe houses that moved them progressively farther from their last known locations, making investigation increasingly difficult. Her father's role was to ensure that law enforcement response remained inadequate. Missing person reports were downgraded to runaway classifications, evidence was lost or contaminated, investigations were transferred between departments until they lost momentum, and witnesses were either intimidated into silence or relocated beyond reach of investigators. The system was designed to create the appearance of police action while ensuring no meaningful progress toward resolution. The financial structure of the operation staggered Amanda with its complexity and scope. Payments flowed through a network of shell companies and charitable foundations, amounts that made her father's legitimate salary seem insignificant by comparison. $50,000 per child was just the base rate. Complications that required additional corruption or evidence suppression commanded premium pricing that could reach six figures. Mayor Davidson's voice joined the conversation, revealing political protection that extended to the highest levels of city government. The federal task force inquiry has been successfully diverted to focus on drug trafficking rather than human trafficking, he reported with satisfaction. Our contacts in the FBI feel their suffering reduced to profit margins and operational efficiency metrics. The regional scope of the network became apparent as the conversation continued. Safe houses operated in 3 states, with transportation routes that moved children hundreds of miles from their origins. Corrupt officials in multiple jurisdictions provided protection and misdirection, creating a system where no single law enforcement agency had enough information to see the complete picture. Senator Margaret Holbrook's voice carried through the study's open door, discussing federal legislation that would further weaken oversight of foster care systems. The new regulations will reduce reporting requirements and eliminate federal review of cases involving children who age out of the system, she explained. It provides perfect cover for expanding operations into older demographics. Amanda's horror deepened as she realized the network wasn't just maintaining existing criminal activities, it was actively working to create conditions that would allow expansion and increased efficiency. Laws were being crafted to facilitate crimes, regulations designed to reduce protection for the most vulnerable members of society. The meeting concluded with discussion of recruitment targets and operational expansion. Names of specific facilities were mentioned: foster homes, youth shelters, residential treatment centers, all places where vulnerable children might be found and selected for exploitation. Amanda recognized some of the locations from her family's charitable activities, organizations that received generous donations from the Martinez Foundation. As the guests began to disperse, returning to the main party to continue their public performance of civic virtue, Amanda remained hidden in her alcove, struggling to process the magnitude of what she'd learned. The network wasn't just local corruption, it was a sophisticated criminal enterprise with tentacles reaching into every level of government, law enforcement, and social services. The most devastating realization was that her family's entire social circle, the people she'd grown up thinking of as pillars of community respectability, were actually criminal conspirators who had turned child exploitation into a profitable business model. Every charity gala, every public ceremony, every expression of civic pride was an elaborate performance designed to hide the systematic destruction of young lives. Amanda understood now that she wasn't just carrying the secret of her father's crimes, she was sitting on evidence of corruption that reached into the highest levels of regional power, a network so extensive and well than any actual shift in his actions. But as days passed, the signs became undeniable. Chief Martinez was watching her with the trained suspicion of someone who had spent decades detecting deception, his paternal warmth increasingly replaced by the calculated vigilance of a criminal protecting valuable secrets. New electronic locks appeared on his study door, sophisticated biometric systems that required fingerprint access rather than the traditional key that Amanda had occasionally borrowed in the past. The desk drawers that had once yielded crucial evidence now bore digital locks with codes that changed weekly, their LED displays blinking red like electronic eyes warning away potential intruders. Her father's phone conversations became increasingly cryptic, conducted in whispers behind closed doors or postponed entirely when Amanda appeared within potential earshot. The burner phones disappeared entirely from visible locations, presumably secured in new hiding places that would require more sophisticated reconnaissance to discover. Even his computer habits changed, with encrypted communication software replacing email and instant deletion of browsing history after every session. Elena's nervousness had escalated from subtle anxiety to barely controlled panic, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling as she arranged flowers or planned social events with the obsessive focus of someone desperate for distraction. Amanda began to suspect that her mother knew far more than she'd previously believed, perhaps not the operational details, but certainly enough to understand that their comfortable lifestyle depended on maintaining dangerous secrets. "Your father has been under tremendous stress at work," Elena explained during one of their increasingly awkward breakfast conversations, her voice carrying undertones that suggested she was really talking about something else entirely. "Important cases, political pressure from City Hall. We all need to be supportive and discreet about family matters." The emphasis on discretion felt like a warning, though Amanda couldn't determine whether her mother was trying to protect her from knowledge or preparing her to keep secrets she might already possess. Elena's references to family loyalty and private matters had taken on ominous implications that made every conversation feel like walking through a minefield of double meanings. Amanda's sense of being watched extended beyond her father's increased vigilance. She noticed how conversations stopped when she entered rooms, how household staff avoided extended eye contact, how family friends to be elaborate money laundering operations, opportunities for criminal associates to gather under the protective cover of civic virtue. Amanda found herself studying guest lists and seating arrangements, trying to identify which attendees were legitimate community leaders and which were part of her father's criminal network. Her father's study sessions, times when he worked late into the night on what he claimed were complex police cases, now struck Amanda as operational planning meetings. The maps spread across his desk weren't crime scene analyses, but transportation routes and safe house locations. The manila folders labeled with case numbers contained not police reports, but financial records and communication logs that coordinated criminal activities across multiple states. The paranoia was becoming self-reinforcing as Amanda questioned every interaction, every casual comment, every seemingly innocent question about her activities. Was Maria's inquiry about her homework schedule genuine concern or intelligence gathering for her father? Did Elena's suggestions about weekend activities reflect maternal care or attempts to monitor Amanda's movements? The constant vigilance required to maintain her secret investigation while appearing normally behaved was exhausting for someone who should have been worried about middle school social dynamics rather than criminal surveillance. Most disturbing was the growing realization that her investigation had reached a natural conclusion. She now possessed enough evidence to expose the entire network, but continuing to gather information was becoming increasingly dangerous. Her father's suspicious behavior suggested he was aware that someone within his inner circle posed a security risk, and his methods for handling such threats were unlikely to show mercy even for family members. Amanda faced the terrible knowledge that her window of opportunity was closing. Each passing day brought increased risk of discovery, and her father's escalating security measures suggested he was preparing for the possibility of exposure. The decision she'd been postponing, whether to remain silent or find a way to expose the truth, could no longer be delayed. The weight of this realization settled over Amanda like a suffocating blanket. At 12 years old, She was carrying evidence that could destroy a criminal network reaching into the highest levels of regional government. But using that evidence would almost certainly destroy her own family in the process. The comfortable life she'd always known. Police chief's daughter. She was someone who held the power to save lives or preserve lies, and the choice between them would define not just her future, but her fundamental identity as a human being. The abandoned subway tunnel beneath the city's industrial district had been closed for 15 years, its entrances sealed with official barriers that most people respected without question. But Detective Marcus Williams wasn't most people, and Scout's insistent whining at the rusted grating suggested something important lay beyond the bureaucratic warnings about structural instability and environmental hazards. Williams had been operating outside official channels for 3 weeks now, ever since Captain Rodriguez's suspicious dismissal of the warehouse evidence had convinced him that the corruption in their department ran deeper than individual cases. His investigation had become a solitary mission, conducted during off-duty hours with only Scout as backup, building a case file that existed solely on encrypted drives hidden in his apartment. Scout's extraordinary abilities had led them to locations that would never have appeared on official search grids. The dog's tracking skills seemed to transcend normal scent detection, leading Williams to places where human suffering had left invisible traces that only Scout could perceive. Tonight, the German Shepherd's behavior suggested they were close to something significant. His ears pricked forward, hackles raised, body language indicating both excitement and distress. The tunnel's interior revealed a sophisticated operation disguised as urban decay. What appeared to be random homeless encampments were actually carefully positioned surveillance points, providing clear sightlines to multiple entrances while maintaining the appearance of dereliction. Williams documented everything with his camera, noting details that would have been missed by cursory official inspections. Scout led him deeper into the tunnel system, past makeshift barriers that had been constructed to look accidental, but were clearly designed to control access and movement. The dog's tracking behavior indicated recent human presence, not the random foot traffic of urban explorers or homeless individuals, but organized movement of multiple people through predetermined routes. The discovery that made Williams' blood run cold came at a junction where 3 tunnel branches converged. Hidden beneath a false floor panel, Scout uncovered a cache of personal belongings, shoes, jewelry, small toys, the kind of items that children carry as comfort objects. But these weren't lost possessions. They were organized and cached to think like a federal investigator, building cases that could withstand scrutiny from defense attorneys who specialized in challenging local law enforcement credibility. The surveillance work was the most dangerous aspect of his independent investigation. Following suspects without backup or official authorization meant operating completely alone, relying on Scout's senses to warn of approaching danger. Williams had identified 3 individuals whose movements correlated with missing children reports: a social worker named Patricia Meadows, a transportation company owner called Vincent Torres, and surprisingly, a frequent visitor to high-end charity events who drove expensive cars despite having no obvious source of wealth. His growing certainty about corruption reaching the highest levels of law enforcement came from patterns that were too consistent to be coincidental. Every lead he'd pursued through official channels had been systematically destroyed, evidence had disappeared from secure storage, and witnesses had become unavailable with timing that suggested coordination from someone with significant authority within the department. The decision to seek federal assistance represented a point of no return in Williams' career. Contacting the FBI would essentially declare war on his own department, labeling him as either a whistleblower or a traitor, depending on which side of the corruption divide people stood. But his 3 weeks of independent investigation had produced evidence that couldn't be ignored. Not just individual crimes, but systematic criminal enterprise protected by law enforcement corruption. Williams had identified an FBI agent named Sarah Chen, who specialized in public corruption cases and had a reputation for protecting sources who provided credible information about official misconduct. His initial contact would need to be carefully orchestrated, providing enough evidence to establish credibility while protecting his ongoing investigation from premature exposure. Scout's reaction to certain locations continued to provide the most reliable intelligence in Williams' investigation. The dog's ability to sense trauma and fear had led them to 3 additional sites where children had been held before transportation to unknown destinations. Each location yielded evidence that painted a picture of systematic exploitation, but also revealed the sophisticated nature of the criminal network they were attempting to expose. The personal cost of the investigation was becoming increasingly apparent. Williams' official case clearance rate had suffered due to time and attention diverted to his unauthorized activities. Despite the risks, the dog's behavior around certain police officers confirmed Williams' suspicions about departmental corruption. Scout's instinctive wariness serving as an early warning system for identifying potentially compromised colleagues. As Williams prepared to make contact with federal authorities, he realized his investigation had evolved beyond simply solving missing children cases. He was now documenting evidence of systematic corruption that reached into the highest levels of local government, a criminal enterprise so sophisticated and well protected that exposing it would require more than just local law enforcement action. The evidence cache hidden in his apartment contained enough information to destroy careers and expose criminal activities that had operated with impunity for years. But Williams understood that possessing such evidence also made him a target for people who had already demonstrated their willingness to make inconvenient problems disappear permanently. The missing person report that landed on Williams' desk Monday morning carried an urgency that made his stomach tighten with familiar dread. 15-year-old Maria Santos had vanished from St. Catherine's Academy, not a foster care facility this time, but an exclusive private school known for educating the children of the city's most prominent families. The shift in victim demographics suggested the trafficking network was expanding its operations or responding to increased demand for a different type of victim. Amanda Martinez recognized Maria's photograph immediately when the news report appeared on the local evening broadcast. She'd met Maria at 3 different charity fundraisers over the past year, events where Amanda's family mingled with other wealthy donors while raising money for various causes that now seemed like elaborate fronts for criminal activities. Maria had been part of St. Catherine's volunteer program, helping serve meals at homeless shelters and reading to children at community centers, her bright smile and genuine enthusiasm making her memorable among the dozens of students who participated in mandatory community service. The connection between Maria's disappearance and Amanda's school became terrifyingly personal when she discovered that Maria had been volunteering with the Martinez Family Foundation's Youth Mentorship Program. The same charitable initiative that Amanda's mother managed with such apparent dedication had provided access to vulnerable children who could be targeted for exploitation. The realization that her family's public good works were actually hunting grounds for victims made Amanda physically ill. Williams and Scout's investigation into clubs, residential areas, where the scent trail indicated Maria had been transported before disappearing entirely. The evidence pointing toward Martinez family involvement emerged gradually through Williams' methodical investigation. Security footage from cameras near Maria's last known location showed vehicles registered to companies that appeared in Williams' growing database of suspicious entities. Financial records revealed connections between the Martinez Family Foundation and organizations that had provided access to other missing children. Amanda's near discovery of Williams and Scout's investigation occurred during one of their surveillance operations in her own neighborhood. She'd been walking their family dog, a small terrier named Precious, who served as her cover for extended outdoor reconnaissance, when she noticed an unmarked police car parked on the street adjacent to their estate. Through binoculars she'd borrowed from her father's collection, Amanda could see a man and a large German shepherd conducting what appeared to be systematic observation of houses in their area. The realization that law enforcement was investigating in her neighborhood sent Amanda's paranoia into overdrive. Was this connected to her father's criminal activities? Had someone else discovered evidence of the trafficking network? Were federal agents already building a case that might expose her family's involvement? The possibility that she wasn't the only person who knew her father's secrets was both terrifying and oddly comforting. Williams' discovery of the Martinez connection came through financial analysis that revealed suspicious patterns in the family's charitable donations. Organizations that received Martinez Foundation funding showed statistically unusual rates of missing children from their programs. The correlation was too strong to be coincidental, suggesting either remarkable bad luck or systematic targeting of vulnerable youth through charitable access. The case's urgency became apparent when Scouts tracking led Williams to a location that showed signs of recent activity: fresh tire tracks, recently discarded food containers, evidence that Maria might still be alive and relatively nearby. Unlike previous cases where evidence suggested children had been quickly transported out of the region, Maria's scent trail indicated she was being held locally, possibly for reasons related to her different demographic profile. Amanda's recognition of the urgency came through overheard conversations that revealed Maria's case was being handled differently from previous disappearances. Instead of the usual rapid transportation and disposal of evidence, Maria was being hours, a timeline that seemed to indicate either transportation to a more distant location or something worse. Her father's conversations referenced the need to clean up loose ends and ensure no complications arise from the Santos situation. Williams' investigation revealed that Maria's disappearance coincided with increased activity among known associates of the trafficking network. Surveillance indicated meetings, financial transactions, and logistical preparations that suggested a major operation was being expedited. The professional nature of the response indicated this wasn't a random crime, but part of a sophisticated criminal enterprise with established protocols for handling complications. Amanda realized that Maria Santos wasn't just another victim. She was someone Amanda had actually met, talked to, shared meals with at charity events. The personalization of the crime transformed Amanda's abstract knowledge of her father's activities into visceral understanding of how his crimes destroyed real people she knew and cared about. The convergence of Williams's official investigation and Amanda's secret knowledge created a critical moment where both were racing against time to prevent another child from disappearing into the trafficking network. Neither was aware of the other's activities, but both understood that Maria Santos represented more than just another case. She was potentially the key to exposing an entire criminal enterprise, if either of them could find her before the 48-hour deadline expired. Amanda's world shattered completely when she overheard her father's phone conversation at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night that would forever divide her life into before and after. Hidden in her usual reconnaissance position beneath the main staircase, she listened as Chief Martinez calmly discussed eliminating witnesses who had become inconvenient complications to the network's continued operation. "Detective Williams has become too persistent," her father was saying, his voice carrying the cold professionalism she'd learned to associate with his criminal activities. "His independent investigation poses unacceptable risks to our operations. The Santos girl situation has attracted federal attention we can't afford." The casual way he discussed ending lives, referring to Detective Williams and Maria Santos as problems to be resolved, made Amanda's entire body tremble with horror and rage. These weren't abstract victims anymore. Williams was someone trying to save children, and Maria was a girl Amanda had shared conversations with at charity events. Intervention that won't raise suspicious questions. Amanda realized with crystalline clarity that her continued silence wasn't neutrality, it was complicity. Every day she failed to act was another day children remained in danger, another day the network operated with impunity, another day innocent people like Detective Williams risked their lives trying to uncover truths she already possessed. Her comfortable lifestyle wasn't just built on criminal profits. Her silence was actively enabling ongoing crimes. The moral weight of her decision pressed down on Amanda like a suffocating blanket. Her family's destruction was no longer a hypothetical consequence, but an inevitable result of doing what she knew was right. Chief Martinez would face federal charges, Elena would experience public humiliation and social ostracism, Tommy would grow up knowing his father was a criminal, and their comfortable lifestyle would disappear forever. But balanced against that personal cost were the lives of children who continued to disappear while she wrestled with family loyalty. Maria Santos was being held somewhere, probably terrified and hoping someone would find her. Detective Williams was risking his life to investigate crimes she could expose with a single phone call. Future victims who hadn't yet been selected were depending on someone having the courage to stop the network before their names appeared on targeting lists. Amanda's internal debate had raged for weeks, but hearing her father plan to eliminate witnesses who threatened his criminal enterprise eliminated any remaining ambiguity about his character. The man she'd loved as a father was willing to destroy anyone who posed a risk to his profitable exploitation of children. Family loyalty couldn't justify protecting someone who treated human lives as disposable obstacles to wealth accumulation. Her decision crystallized in that moment beneath the staircase, listening to her father discuss murder with the same detached efficiency he might use to plan a vacation. Amanda Martinez would no longer be a passive observer of her family's crimes. She would become an active agent of justice, regardless of the personal cost. The most dangerous phase of her investigation lay ahead, gathering concrete evidence that federal authorities could use to build prosecutable cases against the entire network. This meant escalating her surveillance activities, taking greater risks to document criminal activities, and operating under the constant threat of discovery by people who had already demonstrated their willingness to eliminate inconvenient problems permanently. Amanda understood the power to save lives and expose systematic corruption, and she was finally ready to use that power despite knowing it would cost her everything she'd ever known or loved. The choice between family loyalty and moral responsibility had seemed impossible, until she heard her father planning to destroy people whose only crime was trying to protect children. In that moment, Amanda realized that some choices weren't really choices at all. They were tests of fundamental character that revealed who you truly were beneath comfortable lies and convenient rationalizations. Amanda Martinez had discovered who she truly was, someone willing to sacrifice her own comfortable life to save others, even if those others were strangers she'd never meet, and the person she was exposing was the father she'd once loved unconditionally. Amanda's transformation from sheltered 12-year-old to determined investigator required tools that her privileged upbringing had never prepared her to acquire. The decision to record her father's conversations represented a point of no return, concrete evidence gathering that would either expose a criminal network or destroy her family if discovered prematurely. Her approach to obtaining surveillance equipment demonstrated the methodical intelligence that had always impressed her private school teachers, now applied to purposes they could never have imagined. The research phase consumed 3 weeks of careful online investigation, conducted during late-night hours when the household staff had retired and her parents believed she was safely asleep in her canopy bed. Amanda's computer skills, developed through expensive private tutoring and advanced placement courses, proved invaluable in navigating the complex world of surveillance technology while maintaining digital anonymity that would prevent her activities from being traced back to the Martinez family. Legal admissibility requirements became Amanda's obsession as she studied federal evidence standards and court precedents that would determine whether her recordings could actually be used to prosecute her father's criminal network. She learned about single-party consent laws, chain of custody procedures, and authentication requirements that would make her evidence legally bulletproof. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using legal research skills to build a case against the police chief who had taught her to respect law and order. The surveillance equipment she ultimately selected represented a compromise between capability and concealment, devices small enough to hide effectively, but sophisticated enough to capture clear audio in suspicious of her behavior. Amanda established a post office box using false identification she created through online tutorials, learning document forgery techniques that would have alarmed her family if they'd realized their daughter was acquiring skills typically associated with professional criminals. Package delivery nearly exposed her entire operation when her father arrived home unexpectedly, while Amanda was accepting delivery of her surveillance equipment from the Postal Service. Only quick thinking and a prepared cover story about ordering surprise birthday gifts for Elena saved her from immediate discovery, but the close call demonstrated how dangerous her investigation had become. Testing the recording equipment in her bedroom revealed both the device's capabilities and their limitations, requiring Amanda to develop sophisticated understanding of acoustic engineering and sound quality optimization. She learned to recognize which locations in the mansion provided optimal recording conditions, which times of day offered the best opportunities for surveillance, and which of her father's behavioral patterns could be exploited for evidence gathering. Her technical sophistication grew rapidly as necessity drove innovation, Amanda developing spycraft techniques that would have impressed professional intelligence operatives. She learned to conceal recording devices in everyday objects, to predict her father's movements and schedule his conversations, to retrieve and replace equipment without leaving traces of her activities. The most devastating realization during this preparation phase was understanding that she was methodically planning her own family's destruction. Every piece of equipment she acquired, every technique she mastered, every plan she developed, brought her closer to exposing crimes that would send her father to federal prison and destroy everything she'd ever known about her comfortable life. Amanda's bedroom became a command center for operations that would have impressed federal investigators, filled with encrypted files, surveillance schedules, and evidence analysis that represented months of careful planning and execution. The innocent girl who had accidentally discovered her father's safe 4 months ago had evolved into someone capable of conducting sophisticated intelligence operations against her own family. Her growing expertise in surveillance technology was matched by increasing sophistication in operational security, Amanda learning to compartmentalize her activities and maintain cover stories that would withstand casual scrutiny from family members who were becoming increasingly suspicious of her behavior and movements. The psychological preparation for what she was about more than investigative tools. They were instruments of justice that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of multiple lives, including her own. Amanda's hands trembled as she positioned the first recording device beneath her father's desk, the tiny microphone no larger than a shirt button, but sophisticated enough to capture conversations with courtroom-quality clarity. 3 months of planning and preparation had led to this moment, the beginning of evidence gathering that would either expose a criminal network or destroy her family if her surveillance activities were discovered. The technical challenges proved more complex than her research had anticipated. Chief Martinez's study was designed with acoustic properties that made recording difficult. Heavy curtains absorbed sound, thick carpeting muffled footsteps, and the room's size created echoes that could compromise audio quality. Amanda learned through trial and error to position devices for optimal sound capture while ensuring they remained invisible to someone who inspected the room with the trained suspicion of a career law enforcement officer. Her father's increasingly suspicious behavior added layers of complexity to an already dangerous operation. He'd begun conducting random security sweeps of his study, running electronic detection equipment that could identify hidden surveillance devices. Amanda countered by learning about RF shielding and low-power recording technology that operated below the threshold of standard detection equipment, her technical knowledge growing to match the sophisticated security measures her father employed. The near-discovery incident occurred during her 3rd week of active surveillance, when Amanda accidentally left a backup recording device visible on her father's bookshelf, a mistake that could have ended her investigation and potentially her life if Chief Martinez had realized his own daughter was documenting his criminal activities. Only his assumption that the device belonged to household staff conducting routine cleaning saved Amanda from immediate exposure. Her first successful recording captured a conversation that confirmed her worst fears about the scope and brutality of her father's criminal network. Chief Martinez discussed specific bribes with the casual efficiency of someone managing routine business transactions, referring to missing children by case numbers rather than names, treating their disappearances as successful operational outcomes rather than human tragedies. Amanda's emotional reaction to hearing her father's voice calmly discussing crimes against children was devastating and transformative. The loving parent who had read her bedtime case that would eventually bring him to justice. Building a library of evidence required weeks of careful surveillance, Amanda developing increasingly sophisticated techniques for predicting her father's schedule and positioning recording equipment to capture his most incriminating conversations. She learned to recognize patterns in his behavior, which days he conducted sensitive business, which times he was most likely to discuss operational details, which locations provided the best opportunities for surveillance. Her growing skill at predicting Chief Martinez's habits enabled Amanda to position recording devices with surgical precision, capturing conversations that revealed the full scope of the trafficking network's operations, financial structure, and protection mechanisms. Each successful recording added crucial pieces to a puzzle that painted a comprehensive picture of systematic criminal enterprise reaching into the highest levels of local government. The psychological toll of living a double life within her own home proved almost unbearable for someone who had recently been a typical 12-year-old, worried about homework and social activities. Amanda became expert at maintaining normal family interactions while secretly documenting evidence that would send her father to federal prison, the emotional strain manifesting in sleeplessness, loss of appetite, and constant anxiety about discovery. Her father's conversations revealed details about ongoing operations that made Amanda's surveillance work feel urgently necessary, despite its personal cost. Names of children who were currently being processed through the trafficking network, locations where victims were being held, timeline for operations that could be disrupted if authorities acted quickly enough. Amanda realized she wasn't just gathering historical evidence, but documenting crimes in progress that could be stopped if her recordings reached the right people. The sophistication of her surveillance operation grew to include multiple recording devices positioned throughout the mansion, backup systems that ensured crucial conversations wouldn't be lost due to equipment failure, and redundant storage systems that protected her evidence from discovery or destruction. Amanda had become a one-person intelligence operation targeting her own family's criminal activities. Each recording session required careful preparation and flawless execution, Amanda developing rituals and procedures that minimized risk while maximizing the quality and completeness of her evidence gathering. She learned to operate under constant stress, maintaining perfect operational security. Individual activities, encompassing a network of corruption that infected multiple levels of government and law enforcement throughout the region. The conversation that would eventually become Exhibit A in federal court began at 11:23 p.m. on a Wednesday night in late October. Amanda's hidden recording device capturing every word as her father orchestrated what he described as final resolution protocols for the Santos situation and related complications that threatened network security. Maria Santos has served her purpose as a test case, Chief Martinez said into his encrypted phone, his voice carrying the cold calculation Amanda had learned to associate with his most serious criminal planning. Her family's political connections make permanent disposal problematic, but the intelligence gathered from her processing has validated our expansion into higher demographic targets. Amanda's blood froze as she realized her father was discussing Maria Santos, the 15-year-old she'd met at charity events, whose bright smile and enthusiasm for volunteer work had made her memorable among dozens of students participating in community service programs. The casual reference to disposal and processing made Amanda physically ill, but she forced herself to remain silent and continue recording. The operational details her father discussed revealed the current trafficking ring's sophisticated logistics and timeline. Transport to the regional facility is scheduled for Friday evening, he continued, providing specific addresses and routes that Amanda carefully noted for later transcription. The Vancouver connection has confirmed receipt capacity for 3 additional units this month, with premium pricing for the higher quality demographic. Her father's discussion of eliminating witnesses demonstrated the network's willingness to use extreme measures to protect their criminal enterprise. Detective Williams' surveillance activities have identified too many operational locations, Chief Martinez explained to his unknown contact. His federal connections make direct action risky, but industrial accidents can be arranged that will appear coincidental while removing the investigative threat permanently. The recording captured names, locations, financial details, and operational procedures that would provide federal investigators with a comprehensive roadmap for dismantling the entire trafficking network. Amanda listened as her father discussed corrupt judges who could be relied upon to dismiss cases, prosecutors who ensured investigations never gained momentum, resultado toward drug trafficking, maintaining our operational security, recording evidence of crimes in progress, plans being made that could still be disrupted if authorities acted quickly enough. Maria Santos was still alive. Detective Williams was still investigating despite being targeted for elimination, and the trafficking network was actively processing new victims who could still be saved if her recordings reached federal investigators in time. The conversation concluded with scheduling details for the next phase of operations, including expansion into additional states and recruitment protocols that would increase the network's capacity for processing victims from various demographic categories. Amanda's father discussed these plans with the enthusiasm of a successful businessman expanding profitable operations into new markets. As the recording device captured the final moments of the conversation, Amanda understood that she now possessed evidence powerful enough to destroy the entire criminal network her father had built. The technical quality was perfect, the content was comprehensively incriminating, and the legal admissibility was unquestionable based on her research into federal evidence standards. Her decision crystallized as she listened to her father's voice, planning crimes that would destroy more innocent lives while enriching himself and his criminal associates. Amanda had gathered enough evidence to save Maria Santos, protect Detective Williams, and prevent future children from disappearing into the trafficking network that had operated with impunity for too long. The recording represented more than just evidence. It was Amanda's declaration that she would no longer be complicit in her family's crimes through silence and inaction. Whatever personal cost she would pay for exposing the truth, it was justified by the lives that would be saved and the justice that would finally be served. Amanda spent her final night in the childhood bedroom she would never see again, surrounded by luxury purchased with criminal profits, knowing that tomorrow she would contact federal authorities and begin the process that would destroy everything she had ever known about her family and her comfortable life. The frightened girl who had accidentally discovered her father's safe 6 months ago had evolved into someone willing to sacrifice everything familiar to ensure justice for victims whose names she might never know, but whose suffering she could help end. The hidden recording device had captured more than just criminal conversations. It had documented Amanda Martinez's transformation from privileged child to agent of justice, someone who understood that moral courage sometimes take down her father's network. Using anonymous computer terminals to avoid his surveillance, she zeroed in on the FBI's Public Corruption Unit and Human Trafficking Task Force. One name kept surfacing: Special Agent Sarah Chen, respected for dismantling high-level corruption and protecting vulnerable sources. Amanda studied Chen's record, weighing if she'd believe a 12-year-old whose father was the primary target. The first call came at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Amanda had her notes ready, backup files encrypted, and an emergency escape plan. Special Agent Chen, "This is about Police Chief Roberto Martinez," she said, voice steady despite the fear. "I have recordings and documentation of systematic criminal activity, missing children, federal case manipulation." Chen was skeptical. "Accusations against law enforcement require substantial evidence. Can you have a parent?" "My father is Chief Martinez," Amanda cut in. "I have him on tape discussing witness elimination. Everyone local is compromised." Amanda sent sample recordings and photos. The tone changed instantly. "Miss Martinez, your evidence suggests criminal activity far beyond local jurisdiction. We need to protect you immediately," Chen said. Secure communication protocols were established, encrypted phones, coded signals, and extraction plans. Amanda became an official federal informant, protected but isolated. Chen warned her. She'd likely testify in court. Her family would be destroyed. Her comfortable life would vanish. "I understand," Amanda said. "Children are dying while my father profits. My comfort isn't worth more than their lives." The handover happened in the dim concrete of the courthouse parking garage. Amanda arrived on time with a backpack holding 8 months of surveillance, recordings, photos, financial records, all organized with transcripts, context notes, and cross-references. Chen arrived with technical specialist Martinez, a digital forensics expert, and other agents. As the files were examined, it became clear Amanda had built a professional-grade case. Audio authenticity checks confirmed her recordings would survive any defense challenge. Her debrief transformed raw evidence into a clear prosecution map, decoding language, charting relationships, and laying bare the trafficking network's hierarchy. Chen, impressed, told her, "You've essentially run a professional trafficking operations that had operated with impunity due to corruption at every level of the justice system." Discussion of witness protection protocols reflected the extreme danger Amanda faced as the primary source of evidence against a criminal network that had already demonstrated willingness to eliminate inconvenient problems through extreme measures. Federal protection would be necessary not just during the investigation phase, but potentially for years following prosecution and conviction of the criminal associates. Amanda's safety during the ongoing investigation required sophisticated security measures, including electronic monitoring, regular check-ins with federal handlers, and emergency extraction procedures that could be implemented if her cover was compromised. The level of protection reflected both the value of her continued cooperation and the extreme danger posed by people who had built criminal empire worth millions of dollars. The magnitude of Amanda's evidence became fully apparent when Agent Chen explained that her documentation had opened multiple federal cases involving public corruption, human trafficking, money laundering, and racketeering charges that could result in life sentences for principal defendants. "Your courage in gathering this evidence will save countless lives and bring justice to victims who might otherwise never have received it." The evidence transfer concluded with Amanda's formal acceptance of federal witness status, understanding that her cooperation would require testimony in multiple trials and potentially relocation under permanent witness protection, depending on the outcome of prosecutions. The 12-year-old girl who had accidentally discovered her father's criminal activities had evolved into the government's primary witness in dismantling a criminal network that had operated with impunity for years. Federal agents' confirmation that Amanda's evidence exposed corruption in multiple states revealed the true scope of the criminal enterprise she'd uncovered, not just local trafficking operations, but interstate criminal organization with connections reaching into federal agencies and national political structures. The formation of Federal Task Force Operation Golden Cage brought together investigators from multiple agencies whose combined expertise would be necessary to dismantle the sophisticated criminal network Amanda's evidence had exposed, with Agent Chen serving as lead coordinator for an investigation that would span multiple states and involve dozens of criminal defendants at every level of government and law enforcement. Coordination with non-corrupt local law enforcement proved challenging as federal investigators struggled to identify which officers could be trusted with sensitive information about an obvious candidate for cooperation. but approaching him required careful verification of his integrity and motivations. William's shock at discovering Amanda's identity and her connection to Chief Martinez became apparent during his first briefing with federal agents, who explained that the 12-year-old daughter of his own police chief had been conducting the surveillance operation that had produced evidence of systematic corruption within his department. The realization that a child had uncovered criminal activities that had eluded his own investigation was both humbling and inspiring. Amanda Martinez has been gathering evidence of her father's criminal activities for 8 months, Agent Chen explained to the stunned detective. Her documentation includes recordings, financial records, and operational intelligence that reveals the full scope of the trafficking network you've been investigating independently. Scout's role in corroborating Amanda's evidence proved crucial, as the German Shepherd's extraordinary tracking abilities led federal investigators to locations that confirmed details from Amanda's surveillance work, providing independent verification of information that might otherwise have been dismissed as the imaginative claims of a 12-year-old seeking attention or revenge against strict parents. The coordination between Amanda's intelligence and Scout's physical evidence created a comprehensive case that federal prosecutors described as the most thoroughly documented corruption investigation in the region's history, with multiple forms of evidence supporting every major allegation against the criminal network's operations and protection mechanisms. Federal surveillance operations targeting the corruption network began immediately based on Amanda's intelligence about meeting locations, communication protocols, and operational schedules that provided investigators with unprecedented insight into the criminal organization's activities. Amanda's months of careful observation had created a roadmap that federal agents used to position surveillance teams for maximum effectiveness. Amanda's continued evidence gathering under federal protection allowed investigators to monitor the criminal network's response to increased federal attention, documenting attempts to destroy evidence, eliminate witnesses, and modify operations to avoid detection. Her unique position within the Martinez household provided real-time intelligence about criminal countermeasures that helped federal agents stay ahead of the network's defensive strategies. Rising tension became evident as the criminal network began implementing security measures that suggested awareness of federal investigation into their activities, with increased use of encrypted communications, law enforcement expertise, and institutional knowledge that complemented Amanda's intelligence gathering, creating a comprehensive investigation that combined insider information with professional investigative techniques and federal resources necessary for successful prosecution of complex criminal enterprise. The federal investigation's scope expanded rapidly as Amanda's evidence revealed connections to criminal activities in multiple states, requiring coordination with FBI field offices, federal prosecutors, and local law enforcement agencies that had unknowingly been investigating isolated pieces of the same criminal network for years. Amanda's dual role as protected witness and active intelligence asset created unprecedented challenges for federal agents who had never worked with a juvenile informant gathering evidence against her own family members while continuing to live in the same household as the primary targets of their investigation. The first sign of change came on a Thursday morning. Amanda Martinez noticed her father, Chief Martinez, staring at his encrypted phone, not with the cold calculation she'd grown used to, but with something closer to fear. Reports were coming in from his network of corrupt associates. The feds were asking questions, targeted ones. Someone was leaking sensitive intelligence. "There's been a breach," Martinez muttered during an emergency call. "They know about communication protocols, financial flows. This is someone close, someone inside." That moment marked the transformation of the Martinez mansion from luxurious sanctuary to a surveillance fortress. Amanda's home, once filled with warmth, art, and private space, became a prison wrapped in biometric locks, motion sensors, and constant patrols. Her every move was monitored, and Amanda knew why. She was the breach. For months, Amanda had been working in secret with federal agents, gathering intel that could dismantle her father's criminal empire. But as counter-surveillance tightened, and Elena, her mother, grew increasingly suspicious, the walls began closing in. "You've been asking questions," Elena said over breakfast, her voice trembling. "About your father's work. What exactly are you looking for?" Amanda deflected, but Elena's instincts sharpened. Meanwhile, her father's paranoia manifested in daily sweeps for bugs, burner phones, and private conversations held in soundproof rooms. Amanda's task, to keep collecting evidence, became exponentially more dangerous. She narrowly avoided exposure 3 times in 1 week. "Who are you helping? Why are you tearing this family apart?" Amanda couldn't respond honestly. Not yet. But the moment of reckoning came when Amanda overheard her father mention permanent solutions. He was no longer talking about damage control. He was planning executions, of insiders, of threats. And if they discovered her, she would not be spared. Federal agents had anticipated this. Amanda's emergency extraction was triggered the moment her identity as the informant was suspected. Agent Chen's voice came through encrypted text. "You're compromised. Pack only what you need. We're coming tonight." What followed was a blur. Federal marshals in black, silent coordination, a tearful goodbye to her little brother Tommy, too young to understand the danger, and one final lingering look at the life she was leaving behind. Her room, once filled with designer clothes and polished furniture, now felt grotesque. Every luxury had been bought with blood money. The home she once felt proud of now symbolized victims her father helped exploit. Elena's final words haunted her. "You destroyed us, for strangers." But Amanda knew the truth. "They're not strangers, Mom. They're victims of the life you helped build." Amanda's new home was a secure federal safe house, bland walls, utilitarian furniture, and harsh fluorescent lights. Gone were the chandeliers and polished marble floors. Gone was normalcy. Her life now revolved around court prep. "Your testimony is the cornerstone," Agent Chen explained. "You're young. Defense lawyers will attack your credibility. You must be ready." Amanda spent long days learning legal procedures, reviewing evidence, reliving traumas. Her youth gave way to sharp analysis and resolve. Prosecutors were stunned by her clarity. "You understand admissibility like a law student," one remarked. But isolation weighed heavily. Phone use was monitored. Friends were unreachable. Her only consistent contacts were agents, marshals, and counselors. Still, she pressed on. Amanda began interpreting new surveillance intel, helping prosecutors piece together timelines and motives. Her insight into her father's mind proved invaluable. The weight of what she carried was immense. Her testimony could send dozens to prison, or if she failed, allow the criminal network to rise again. Dr. Sarah Williams, her trauma counselor, reminded her constantly, "Left a trail, however carefully." Back in the Martinez home, investigators narrowed the leak to someone with intimate access. Her name rose to the surface. Her father's chilling verdict: blood doesn't buy immunity. Amanda's official role as a witness began with quiet intensity. Inside anonymous courtrooms, her voice carried power beyond her years. She described encrypted communications, exposed offshore accounts, confirmed names of officers on the take. Her evidence led to over 40 indictments. Chief Martinez never looked at her during trial. Elena, called as a hostile witness, refused to speak to Amanda. Only Tommy, through supervised visits, offered her brief, fragile moments of childhood. He brought her drawings, mostly of Scout. As convictions rolled in, Amanda's name became a whispered legend among prosecutors. Not because she was a genius, but because she chose truth over comfort. She had dismantled a criminal empire from within. Amanda's future remained uncertain. The network, though decimated, had survivors. Retaliation was a real threat. She might never return to her real name, her hometown, or her former life. But in the walls of the safe house, Amanda began envisioning something new, not revenge, not guilt, but purpose. She started helping investigators design outreach programs for victims. She wrote anonymous letters to other witnesses preparing to testify. She shared her fears and her strength. And late at night, she sometimes opened the drawer where she kept a single photograph of Tommy holding Scout, their faces lit with joy. It reminded her of why she chose to speak up, not for glory, not for justice alone, but because silence had already taken too much. And Amanda Martinez would never be silent again. At 5:47 a.m. on a cold November morning, law enforcement struck. Across 3 states, more than 200 federal agents moved in simultaneously on every target Amanda's months of covert surveillance had exposed. She wasn't there to see it. Safe house walls kept her far from the raids, but the story would later dominate national headlines. The arrest of Chief Roberto Martinez was the centerpiece. Federal agents stormed his mansion as he reviewed encrypted messages from his network. The once revered police chief, long the symbol of civic virtue, was led out in handcuffs, his carefully built public image obliterated. From a country club luncheon in her designer dress and pearls, was charged with corruption. District Attorney Michael Chen, caught trying to destroy evidence, was dragged from his office. Mayor Davidson was arrested mid-press conference on child safety, an irony not lost on the cameras. And in Washington, D.C., Senator Margaret Holbrook faced charges of conspiring to weaken child protection laws to benefit the network. Amanda's recordings had cut through every layer of power, proving the trafficking enterprise reached far beyond her hometown. Media coverage was relentless. Headlines called it the largest corruption and trafficking bust in the region's history, and marveled that the key evidence came from the chief's 12-year-old daughter. For Amanda, watching from the safe house brought mixed emotions, justice for the victims, but also the painful image of her father, both villain and the man who once read her bedtime stories, in chains. Her mother, Elena, doubled down in denial, telling reporters, "My husband is a dedicated public servant, framed by jealous enemies." Tommy, just 8, was kept with relatives, shielded from cameras but not from the truth. The scale of the arrests was no accident. Coordinated timing and communications intercepts, many sourced from Amanda, left no room for escape or warning. Federal forensics authenticated her recordings with ease. The audio quality rivaled professional surveillance. Scout's work further cemented her credibility. The K-9 uncovered burial sites, caches of documents, and personal items from missing children that perfectly matched Amanda's descriptions. Victims themselves confirmed her intel. Maria Santos recounted details of locations, transport methods, and routines identical to those Amanda had reported. Financial forensics traced laundered profits from offshore accounts to luxury lifestyles, proving Amanda's months of data gathering were deadly accurate. By the time prosecutors finished reviewing the combined trove, audio, documents, tracking reports, the defense had little to contest. Amanda's recordings became the backbone of the prosecution's strategy. They captured planning meetings, financial negotiations, and candid discussions of victim exploitation. Defense lawyers tried to undermine her on personal grounds, her age, her family connection, but independent corroboration shut down most avenues of attack. Prosecutors openly praised her. Part. You chose the truth. The stakes were enormous. Grand juries would hear her recordings first, using them to decide on indictments for dozens of high-profile defendants. Federal marshals designed airtight security plans for each court appearance. Amanda's life was still in danger from associates who hadn't yet been caught. Detective Williams and Scout prepared their own testimony, validating Amanda's findings with independent evidence. Victim impact statements from the rescued children added human weight to the cold facts of bank statements and encrypted logs. Their words, about locked rooms, false promises, and stolen childhoods, matched Amanda's intel point for point. Still, she wrestled privately with the collateral damage. "I know this is right," she told Dr. Williams, "but watching my family name burn, seeing Tommy in foster care, it doesn't make the truth any easier." The prosecution's confidence rested on more than just her meticulous evidence. It was her poise, her unwavering moral clarity. She wasn't a child guessing at adult corruption. She had been in the room, unseen, recording, and she hadn't flinched. By the time trial dates loomed, Amanda knew exactly what she carried: the power to decide whether this network stayed dismantled or rose again. And she would carry it into the courtroom, no matter the cost. Amanda's arrival at the federal courthouse turned downtown into a high-security zone. Federal marshals, police, and courthouse officers formed layers of protection around the 12-year-old whose testimony could dismantle the largest corruption case in regional history. News vans packed the streets, reporters crowded behind barricades, and helicopters buzzed overhead. She entered through a back entrance, shielded from the media frenzy. Inside, the grand jury room felt smaller than expected, but no less intimidating. 23 citizens sat in a semicircle, watching the young witness whose words could decide whether dozens of defendants would face trial. Amanda began by explaining how she uncovered her father's criminal empire, her voice steady despite the weight of describing how her childhood shattered upon learning their wealth came from the suffering of other children. "I realized that staying silent would make me complicit," she told them. "Children were disappearing while I lived in luxury paid for by their suffering." Her secret recordings, calm discussions between Police Chief Roberto, trafficking prosecutions the region had ever seen. 8 months of trials revealed the network's staggering reach. None drew more attention than Chief Martinez's own, Amanda's father. The courtroom overflowed with journalists and community members. Father and daughter locked eyes only once. Amanda testified with precision, recounting her recordings and observations. He discussed eliminating witnesses with the same casual tone he used to plan family vacations, she told the jury. Her victim impact statement was devastating. "I lost my father when I discovered he was willing to destroy children for money. Those children deserve to live free lives more than I deserve to keep comfortable lies about who my family really was." The jury convicted Martinez and dozens of co-conspirators. Life sentences for kingpins and decades-long terms for corrupt officials followed. Martinez received 45 years. Scout, a German shepherd, had located burial sites of murdered victims, bringing closure to grieving families. Detective Williams, whose early suspicions helped confirm Amanda's evidence, was promoted to lead a new federal task force with Scout as his partner. The network collapsed completely. Millions in criminal assets were seized. Survivors received specialized care. Amanda's courage became a national story, sparking debates about morality, loyalty, and the cost of speaking truth to power. Under witness protection, Amanda moved 2,000 miles away to live with David and Karen Thompson, teachers experienced in helping traumatized children. Therapy with Dr. Jennifer Martinez helped her reframe her decision as moral courage, not betrayal. "The guilt you feel is natural," Dr. Martinez said, "but it doesn't diminish the extraordinary courage you showed." Amanda began advocating for trafficking victims, speaking to law enforcement, social workers, and community groups. In college, she founded the Martinez Foundation for Child Protection to support children facing impossible moral choices. Her mother, Elena, gradually accepted the truth, rebuilding a cautious relationship with Amanda through supervised visits. Her brother Tommy adapted to life without wealth, learning that family loyalty didn't mean covering up crimes. Williams and Scout's work continued to inspire new approaches to protecting vulnerable children. Amanda's perspective evolved from guilt to acceptance. "I thought I was choosing between saving strangers and destroying my family, but I eventually realized to protect others." She learned the price of truth was everything she once valued, but the reward was everything that truly mattered. In Amanda's darkest moments, when the weight of impossible choices threatened to crush her spirit, it was the unwavering dedication of Detective Williams and Scout that reminded us all what true loyalty looks like. Scout's extraordinary abilities weren't just about tracking criminals. They were about an unbreakable bond between human and dog, a partnership built on trust, understanding, and shared purpose. There's something profoundly moving about watching a German Shepherd work alongside their human partner, sensing not just physical traces but emotional needs, offering comfort without words, and standing ready to face any danger together. Scout represented everything beautiful about the connection between humans and dogs: the intuitive understanding, the fierce loyalty, the quiet strength that appears exactly when we need it most. Amanda found her courage partly through witnessing this remarkable partnership, seeing how love and trust could create something stronger than either individual could achieve alone. In our own lives, our dogs offer us this same gift: unconditional support, emotional clarity, and the reminder that we're never truly alone in our struggles. If you've been feeling like there might be deeper ways to connect with your own loyal companion, you might find value in exploring some gentle guidance that honors the special bond you already share. Sometimes we just need a little help understanding what our dogs are trying to tell us. Would you like to learn more about deepening your connection with your faithful friend?